everyone! Happy Tuesday and happy So What Day. I'm excited about today because we are in the middle of National Quilting Month. So I have a fun little project to go over with you that is super cute for spring decor, but also for those of you who are celebrating Easter. You will get into the spirit of things with today's project. And if you don't celebrate Easter, then this will still be a cute project that you can use to celebrate spring. So we're going to talk about a couple of techniques using some great sulky products. So before I get into everything, let me just talk about our great sale that's going on right now. So we've got 25% off some of the things I'm going to talk about today. One of those is cotton and steel thread. This is a fantastic thread to use for quilting and quilty projects. Also 30% off of our glowy and neon threads, paper solvy, which we will be using today, and tender touch stabilizers. So this sale is good until the 22nd of March. So be sure to take advantage of these great prices. All right, so a number of you are coming on saying hello. Hello right back at ya. Be sure to be commenting, liking, and sharing today's post. I completely forgot to put the giveaway information in the description of today's post. However, I will be doing the giveaway as usual. And for one lucky random person who is commenting, sharing, liking, engaging with the post in some way today, I will be giving away our new Dandelion machine embroidery palette. Let me squint a little bit and see if I can bring up this product for you so you can see it. There we go. This is a 6-pack of sulky rayon thread. Actually, 5 rayon threads are included and 1 spool of sulky filaine thread is included. This is a 100% acrylic thread, and it has a really great texture and dimension to it. When you use it for either handwork or machine embroidery, you can fluff up your stitches with a wire brush, creating a faux fur effect. So I'm going to be going over a really cool dandelion project at the end of today's show that utilizes this thread palette. So that will be the giveaway today for one lucky viewer. All right, so today I also wanted to show you again our very cute beginner quilting kit, because as I was preparing for today's show, I went ahead and grabbed my cute project pouch and I loaded it up with the things that I needed for the project I will be talking about today. So this is a really great way to organize yourself with each project that you create. You get your little pouch, and in mine, I have a can of KK2000, which also comes with this kit. I have the 2 spools of thread that I will be using for my quilt blocks and my quilty creations, and I have my favorite 1x6 acrylic ruler that also comes with this kit, and a pack of needles. So I'm all set for the project I will be creating at the present moment. So when I finish with this project, I could swap out my thread colors and get ready for the next project I'll be creating, and everything is kind of nice and neatly contained in this little pouch. And believe me, I need all the help I can get as far as organizing things that go with each project, because otherwise it's pandemonium and I have to remember what thread color I was using for what portion of what project at any given time. So this is a great organizational tool for me. Plus, it's cute, and that also helps. This pouch also is great for a rotary cutter. Your rotary cutter, if you take your KK2000 out, your rotary cutter fits nice and securely in this little elastic pouch. So it's sized perfectly for about a 45 millimeter rotary cutter. So Woo. We sell the pouch separately, also as part of this great kit. So in the kit, you will see you get a can of KK2000 because this is a quilter's best friend. You also get 6 neutral colors of sulky 50 weight cotton thread. Great for all kinds of quilting and piecing projects. You get that ruler I talked about, and you get an assortment pack of organ quilting needles. So these include great sizes from 75 to 90s. So the 75s I use when I'm using the 50 weight cotton thread, and the 90s I use when I'm using a 30 weight cotton thread for quilting. So an assortment pack is great because I have all the needle sizes I need to move from quilting or from piecing to quilting without having to rummage through and find the right needle size. So that's that great little kit. I know I've talked about it before, but I just thought as I was prepping today's episode and utilizing my pouch, I would pass that on for information on to you. And we did have a lucky winner win this cute little beginner quilting kit, and she was so excited. So if that winner was you, give us a thumbs up because we love to hear how excited everybody gets when they get their prizes. And that's one of the highlights of my job is getting to notify the winners. So if you have not won one of our Facebook Live giveaways yet, keep trying because each week we have a new prize to win. All right, so I'm going to start off today talking about this adorable quilt block. Isn't that cute? This quilt block was designed by a company called Sugary Doo, and I really just stumbled upon them looking for cute Eastery, springy type inspiration, and I fell in love with this quilt block. And the other thing I like about it, besides it being so cute, is that the bunny and the carrot are sort of 2 different sections of this block. So you essentially can isolate the bunny portion. And what I thought would be really cute was to take a bunch of bunnies and give them a little border and create a cute little decorative bunting. So you could hang this on your front door, maybe with 3 bunnies strung together with a cute ribbon, or you could put it along your mantle. There are just so many different ways you could utilize the portions of this block. And then that little carrot, you could isolate that as well and create a bunch of little carrots, and that would be really cute kitchen decor for any time of year, really. Or you can do this and combine them into one block and create a larger quilt. So I'm going to show you a few different ways. Well, not a few different ways, but I'm going to show you the finished quilt that they created using this block as well as a few others to really get your creative juices flowing. But first, I'm going to go over some foundation paper piecing basics because that is how this block is constructed. And I thought with Sulky Paper Solvy being on sale right now, there's no time like the present than to grab that up at a great, great price and to get a cute project to go along with it. So with Sulky Paper Solvy, this product comes in 8.5 by 11 sheets. You go ahead and pull it up for you so you can see if I can find it. Of course, I'm not finding it. I apologize. It comes in 8.5 by 11 sheets, and I should have some here because I am in progress with this project. But you can run the sheets. Hold on. Oh, nope. Okay. Did I mention that I need some organizational help? All right. I'm actually looking at the paper solvy hanging on my wall in front of me and it's too far away for me to go grab. However, you can go to sulky.com and look at the paper solvi because, like I said, it is on sale today. The paper solvi comes in 8.5 by 11 sheets. You run the sheets through your printer and transfer your design that way. Then we will sew our block together through the paper solvi, using that as our guide. And instead of having to pick out little pieces of paper once our block is completed, because sometimes with intricate piecing projects, there will be lots and lots of intersecting seams, and you'll have to go in there with a pair of tweezers to pick out your little pieces of paper that you've used for your foundation paper piecing. Instead of doing that, we take a wet cotton swab and run it along our seam lines, and then just lift the paper away. You can also fully saturate the piece and the paper will dissolve away. So a lot of the times, if I'm making a larger quilt and it can be washed, I will leave the paper solvi in through the entire construction process. I'll do all the piecing, I will do my quilt sandwich, I will bind it, all of that until the quilt is complete, and then I will throw the quilt in the washing machine and the paper will just dissolve away. So there are a couple of different removal methods, if you will, depending on the type of project that you're doing. For a block like this, though, when I'm doing a bunting and several sort of independent blocks or pieces, I'll remove that paper sort of before I do any of that quilting. But, you know, to each his own. It's up to you how you would like to remove it or at what point in the construction process you would like to remove it. So I'm going to go over how to get this block started. And again, this is designed by Sugary Dew. This is not a sulky pattern, okay? So this quilt block is not a freebie from Sulky, but it is very affordable. I think it is maybe $3 or $4 for the quilt block, and you get a digital file from Sugary Dew. I linked to it in the description of today's post. I also did a lengthier blog post that it describes my entire process that I used. So if I missed something during the live or you want more information or you want to have all the links in front of you, you can head on over to that blog post and get all the information that you need for this project. I have not completed my bunting yet, so it really gives you the overview of how to do foundation paper piecing using Sulky Fabri-Solvi, and then some embellishment options as well, which I will also go over with you today. Okay, Catherine says, the tweezer route is tedious. Love the dissolve away. Exactly. Paper Solvi is really life-changing if you like to do foundation paper piecing. You will find that you will never go back. When I started working at Sulky and realized that this was a product, I just wanted to use it everywhere and get the word out because it just makes your life so much easier. And that's really what we are all about. So, all right. Of course, my overhead camera decided to do something weird here. So bear with me just a moment and I will see if I can get it to cooperate for me. That way you can see what I am doing much easier. Now nothing wants to work. Bear with me a moment. And yes, I have this camera right overhead. It likes to shut itself off, of course, when I need it the most. What's up with that? Oh goodness, now you're seeing a lot of behind the scenes stuff. And I'm upside down. Super embarrassing. Hold please. Oh goodness gracious. You know, technology's great when it's great and not great when it's not great. I'm going to have to hold things up for you. I apologize that that is not working. Goodness. All right. I may try one more time to get this going. I may have to just restart everything. So bear with me, everyone. Thank you so much. Keep bringing in those questions because I'm watching them, and I will bring them on screen and address those. Yes, Twyla, some days are harder than others. I gotta tell ya, for those of you having severe weather right now as well, like me, we're on day 2 of Blizzard Watch 2021, so it's real interesting. All right, I'll just get on with it and I'll lift some things up for you so you can see them on screen. So when you get your bunny block or whatever foundation paper piecing block or project you want to do, it will come in printable files, of course. Now, you will print them onto your sheets of paper solvy. Now, there may be an instruction sheet that comes before the blocks, so you don't want to waste your paper solvy, so make sure that you're only printing the sheets that you need onto that paper solvy. So once you do that, you'll cut out your pieces, and you could see that they are sectioned off in portions of the block. So I've got 3 portions of, this is the top of the carrot, but I've got 3 portions of bunny block. They're sewn together in 1, 2, and 3. And then there are 3 sections for the carrot block. So you will cut out the pattern in those sections. So this is the pattern for the body of the bunny. So you will also notice there are a sequence of letters and numbers. So this is the D block. So usually it's A, B, C, D. Those are the sections. This is section D. And then I've got portions of the block to piece together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Those are the order in which we are going to piece them together. So now we kind of know the sequence of events for this block. Then you want to be sure that you denote which fabrics you're using for which numbered section of this portion of the block. So for D1, I have chosen to use a solid fabric for the bunny belly. All right, for D2, D3, and D4, I have chosen a print fabric. See how that borders the solid. Then for 5 and 6, I have chosen just a plain white fabric. You want to keep this in mind as you're building the block so you don't accidentally piece a print fabric where you intended a solid to be. So you can either mark that on your fabric piece on the wrong side using a removable marker, or you can also mark it lightly onto your paper solvy so that you remind yourself, okay, I need a solid fabric right here. That's where that was intended. All right, so the other great thing about foundation paper piecing is you can use a lot of your scrap bin to build foundation paper piece blocks. So that's exactly what I did for this. For D1, I know that I need a solid fabric that's at least this big, including seam allowances. That's a very important thing to remember. You not only need a fabric that large, but you need to include your 1/4 inch seam allowance as well with your fabric piece. So a lot of the times I will place my fabric behind, and the paper solvy is so thin that you see how you can see through that? You can see through it and make sure that not only is your piece large enough for that D1, but you also have ample room for your seam allowance beyond that piece. Next, I will take the fabric that I want for D2 and make sure I have a large enough piece to cover that, as well as seam allowances. So this is my little print scrap, and I'll place that behind and say, okay, I definitely have enough there. So here's how you build your block. You will take your paper face up. You'll take your first fabric wrong side up against your paper. Now, remember that we're going wrong side up so that when our fabric folds to the right side, it is covering that whole fabric piece or pattern piece. So you can actually align your fabric along your would-be seam allowance between line 1 and line 2. Now we will take our fabric for piece 2 and place it right side facing the fabric for piece 1. So now I have kind of a sandwich going on. I have my paper and then my 2 fabrics behind it. And what I'm going to do, and see, you can see through how I have extended my fabrics beyond that seam line to account for my seam allowance. Now I'm going to sew just along the line between piece 1 and piece 2. So let's talk about machine settings for foundation paper piecing, also known as FPP. So what I find interesting, or helpful rather, is a 1/4 inch foot. This is a great accessory for quilters of all kind, or just people who like to make quilty projects. The lines on this foot are at about a scant 1/4 inch. So you can use that line as your guide while you're sewing and abut your fabric edge against that line. Then you can line up your needle with that line on your pattern to help you achieve that 1/4 inch. Now, with FPP, we're actually going to trim our seam allowance after we sew this seam. So if you overshoot your seam allowance a little bit, or you have a wonky scrap piece, you will be trimming that at a 1/4 inch after you sew that seam. So it gives you a little bit more room to groove. So I'm just going to put that presser foot on my machine. I also have threaded my machine with the 50 weight cotton thread. This is the cotton and steel thread that is also on sale today. It's a 50 weight thread, like I mentioned, so it's nice and lightweight and helps you achieve very flat seams, whether you are pressing them to one side or pressing them open as you're doing your piecing. With foundation paper piecing, I always press in the direction, pretty much, well, I try to press away from my colored fabric, the darker colored fabric, so that you can't see the seam allowance underneath the lighter colored one. But a lot of the times with this type of piecing, you really have to just press it in the direction it wants to go, because you may have a lot of intersecting seams where it doesn't allow you to either press that open or press it toward the darker fabric. So just keep that in mind, that there's no real hard and fast rule about that. All right. Also, with this particular foot, you can see there is just a small needle opening. So you do want to make sure that your needle position is in the center so that your needle does not accidentally hit your sewing machine foot. All right. Another setting on your machine is your stitch length. A lot of foundation paper piecers like to set their stitch length very, very short, like a 1.5, and a standard would be about a 2.5. So you are narrowing your stitch length quite a bit. The purpose of that is to actually perforate the paper that you're using for paper piecing. Now, with paper solvay, you don't have to perforate it because, like I said, we are going to use a wet cotton swab to remove the paper solvay, so we do not need these super tiny stitches to help perforate that paper for easier removal. I don't like using a 1.5 stitch length anyway because if I mess up and have to rip out my stitches, it becomes very tedious to rip out stitches that are that short. So again, to each their own. You may like using the narrower stitch length. I just don't prefer it myself because I make too many mistakes and I want to be able to rip that out easily. So I'm going to get my machine going. I have lowered my needle into the start of that seam line between piece 1 and piece 2. And I'm going to see again if I can, I'm sorry that you're seeing the behind the scenes here, but I am going to again try and rotate this camera and get it working. I'm so sorry that you have to look at my behind the scenes of our chili cat here. All right. No, it's not what I want to do. Bear with me, everyone. Just a moment. Oh my gosh, I have done it. Yay. All right. Applause, applause. Oh, goodness. Sometimes you just have to encourage yourself with a little applause. Okay. All right, I don't have a third camera today, but I am going to sew this seam and then I'm going to show you all what that looks like. So I just have a 2.5 millimeter stitch length. I've lowered my needle into the paper and now I'm just going to sew a straight stitch. It's not going to take a very long to sew. You can go slightly beyond where that stitch ends. Now, it's also important to mention, here's the seam I just sewed, that not only do you want your fabric to extend beyond to account for seam allowances, but you also want it to extend beyond this sort of outer edge border, because that outer edge border is actually our seam allowance for joining all three portions of the design. So you need to make sure that your fabric also extends beyond that line as well. So now that I have sewn that piece, I turn my fabric to the right side and you can see my block is beginning to form basically from the wrong side. So now I have pieces 1 and 2. And I will, at this point, trim my seam allowance. You can see how I have this wonky piece because I'm using scraps. So I fold the paper along the seam that I just sewed, and then using my great little 1x6 ruler and a rotary cutter and mat, I'm going, now that I can switch to my camera, I am going to trim my 1/4 inch seam allowance. And we start to see this block coming together. I don't have a mat on my table, so I'm just going to trim this up in the air. Do as I say, not as I do, right? All right. Now I have that seam allowance trimmed, and I can go attaching piece 3 now. So I'm just going to finger press that fabric and continue building the block. So, you know what is quite hilarious? I was just talking about how I wanted the center of my bunny, my little bunny chest, to be that solid color. Well, look what I have done here. I made my print fabric the center color. So I'm either going to build this bunny in the opposite way, which would also be very cute, or I would have to rip out that seam because I was not paying attention and I was talking and sewing and working out a camera and all those excuses. So I'm just going to do a reverse of that bunny. That's how I'm going to recover from this mistake. So now I will flip this back over. Let me see if I can get my camera a little closer so you can see. There we go. And alrighty. So now I can see through this paper. You can see my mistake I made. My center block is the print now. I'm going to build piece 3 as another solid fabric. I know Judy is saying your solid is not in the middle. I know. I just noticed that I made a mistake, but I'm going to recover from it. So now I have piece 2. It's definitely large enough. I definitely have ample seam allowance around it. I'm going to turn everything over, and I'm going to place my next fabric along that line. Now, my line is angled in this direction. So now I'm going to sew along side 1 and side 3 to connect those pieces. And I'm going to trim afterwards. So, here we go. Again, sink your needle in at the intersection and sew that straight line. That 1/4 inch foot allows you to really see your seam line. And if you have a fancy machine like I do, you might also have a light indicator that is showing you your seam line, which is also super fun. Okay, so let's go back to this camera. Sorry, we're getting a little, okay. So now I have 1 and 2 seam lines sewn and 1 and 3 seam lines sewn. I'm going to fold my paper back along that seam line, and I'm just going to mark my 1/4 inch seam allowance and then cut it with my scissors since I don't have a cutting mat. And we're going to see how we did. So I'll trim that seam allowance, keeping all my little scraps for future paper piecing projects. And now I'm just going to finger press this. If you happen to have one of those travel irons or a mini craft iron you can keep next to you as a pressing station, this is a great use for it when you are going from sewing machine to cutting mat to pressing mat. Those are super handy. Okay, so now I have my 3 portions of my bunny sewn, and you can see that my print fabric is not really going up and down. You can get really persnickety if you want about your fabric grain and your fabric print going in the right direction. I don't find that it bothers me too much when I am creating fabric or foundation paper pieced patterns. If that is something that irritates you, by all means, take extra care making sure that you have lined up your fabric prints. You could see in this bunny, I have my print going up and down, and then along the cheek, it's going toward the side. Here, it's going backwards. So this is going all over the place. Now, I am totally using scraps with this, so I didn't really have the luxury of making sure that my fabric grain was matching and all of those things. Now, for something like a decorative bunting or even a mini quilt, or if you wanted to make this into a mini quilt and write, you know, Happy Easter in some hand or machine embroidery, a project like that, I am not too concerned with the fabric grain or the print matching or any of those things. So, I mean, that may just be me, and I know everybody is going to feel differently about that. So, by all means, do what you would like to do and what you prefer. So now we have a little bit more trimming that we need to do. And again, since I don't have my trusty rotary cutter mat on my table here, I'm just going to mark and trim as I go. So you can see here, you don't really need to mark this, but I haven't pressed it well enough so that I have crisp edges. But I'm going to trim everything along the outer edge of this block section, not along that seam line, because that seam line is what's going to join our sections in the end. So basically, you build all 3 sections independently and then piece those larger sections together to form the one block. So we're getting a little bit closer. Now I need another piece of solid fabric for the top of my bunny chest area. So let's see what we have in the old scrap bin here. I'm not sure if this one's going to be big enough, so we're going to audition it onto the fabric and see how far we get. So I can kind of barely just make it with this piece. I would definitely recommend using a larger piece than this. But since I have messed up my design by putting my center belly print in place instead of what I was supposed to do, I'm going to see if I can make it work. So along my back side, I'm going to align this piece, taking into account my seam allowances. So making sure I have gone beyond at least 1/4 of an inch with that edge. All right. Right side's facing with my fabrics and paper side facing up. Now I'm going to sew along this seam to create my bunny body. And keep your questions coming in. I'm going to stop for a little Q&A session momentarily, and we will get your questions addressed. A lot of you haven't worked with paper solvy before, so I hope you give it a try with this project. Okay, I'm going to trim up some of my threads because we don't want them to get in the way of our future piecing. So now let's hope that that piece was large enough. I'm going to fold it to the right side. Woo! I just barely am making it here, and I'm probably going to have to cheat a bit when I piece my sides. So I'm going to take liberties with this pattern and cheat it a little bit so that I have at least 1/8 of an inch seam allowance along the top here. All right, and I barely have enough along that top edge as well. So again, do as I say, not as I do, and get a larger piece when that happens. Okay, I need to go in and trim my seam allowance. So again, fold your paper back along that seam line. Place your ruler at your 1/4 inch mark. Someone suggested using a 1/4 inch ruler. great idea. I love this little 1x6 ruler for these smaller projects. We also offer this ruler alone by itself at sulky.com, so you can grab one with your thread purchase today. And now I'm going to trim up that seam allowance. So you get the idea of how your block begins to come together. And it's really fun and it's kind of a meditative process as you move along. All right, and then just keep finger pressing and building the block. So now we have that bunny chest area, and actually I'm kind of liking the choice to have like an inside out bunny. It's actually kind of cute. So now I need that white solid fabric on either side of my bunny. And I have this piece that I have just continued to use for my blocks, for my bunny blocks. And again, be sure to audition your pieces. Make sure they are large enough for the area you are piecing. So if I go on this corner here, I know that's going to be plenty. Then I can put my pieces right side together, kind of aligning my would-be seam allowance end, so that again, when it is folded to the right side, it fully covers that area. You can double check. Now, notice I haven't used any pins, and there are lots of schools of thought on this. By all means, you may use pins and be way more accurate than I am being. You can also even use a washable glue stick to make sure that your pieces are not going to shift. When you get into really, really smaller foundation paper piece patterns, you may find that to be helpful. You can also use the, where did it go? The KK2000, because this is an air-soluble adhesive. You can spray your fabrics a little bit with this, line them up along that seam allowance line, and the product's going to dissipate in the air after a period of time. So that's also a handy tip. And I've seen it many ways. I've researched foundation paper piecing quite a bit, and I guess I just kind of do the nitty-gritty version, or the version that, you know, speaks best to me. So there are going to be people who do this different ways. There are lots of videos out there you can watch of, you know, mega quilt experts that can share their tips with you as well. So now we have our outer seam completed for our 5th portion of this block. So I'm going to again fold my paper along that seam line I just sewed, mark my seam allowance, or like I said, use a rotary cutter if you have a protective mat on your surface. I'm going to mark that seam allowance, trim everything up nicely, and then we will see how I caught that wonky scrap that I used for that top edge. So now my seam allowance is trimmed, and I can finger press my piece away from center. Then I can trim up this white piece along the edge of the paper. And we're really starting to get somewhere. We're only about a half hour in, and part of that was me messing with my camera. So you could see this comes together relatively quickly, especially if you have the right tools for the job set up on your station, such as an iron and a rotary cutting mat. So now we have our white piece along this line, and we're going to build our white piece along the opposite edge. So, same process. And while I am doing it, I will try to answer some questions that have come in. We'll see if I can really multitask. I haven't really proven that I can do so yet today, but we'll try. So, first I'm going to do my auditioning, making sure that this piece is large enough for this area. And again, that's why I like to use a 2.5 stitch length to make sure that I can rip these seams out if I need to. So this is where I have to overcompensate for that upper edge piece that wasn't quite large enough to give me an ample seam allowance. So I'm going to cheat my seam over about 1/8 of an inch, and I'll show you what my stitching looks like once I have done that. So I'm going to cheat my seam over, and then I'm going to blend it into the proper seam line so that everything matches up at the end of the day. So here is what that seam looks like. Can you see that? It's right over here. See how my green fabric underneath does not give me enough of a seam allowance for that intended seam? So I cheated my seam over, and then I blended in, whoops, wrong edge, blended in to meet along that seam line. Now, if you're going for accuracy, and that's really important for you, and you want all of your pretty blocks to match, I don't blame you one bit. By all means, rip that out if you notice that you have a piece that was too small, and grab a piece that is larger and just redo that seam. It doesn't take very much to ensure accuracy and to get your block where you want it to be. Okay, so I've marked my seam line. I'm going to trim that up. Just making sure I'm not catching my fabric underneath or my paper underneath. And we will get the block trimmed up, and you'll see this finished portion of the design. All right, so fold my paper back. Go to my overhead camera here so you can see better. All right, fold my paper back. Now, trim along my outer edge. So we're trimming as we go. We're pressing as we go. If you want, you can sulky KK or glue stick as you go as well, again, for that accuracy assurance. So just like that, we have this portion of the bunny block completed. Here it is from the right side, and I would give this a nice press with my iron. So you'd continue building the block. Next would be, you know, your bunny face, and then your cute bunny ears. And again, I used a little solid right there for the inside of my bunny ear. So now that I am switching things up with my solid and print, I would switch those up as well. So just going with the flow, going with the mistake that I made. And these would be really cute hanging together. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up some of the questions that have come in regarding the paper piecing. So Lori asks, for someone new to FPP, would you recommend a design with larger or smaller pieces? So I would recommend a design with larger pieces. I think it's just easier to handle as you're working through the pattern, easier to understand the method, to get your seam allowances accurate and things like that. So I would go with a pattern that has larger pieces. And I actually thought This bunny pattern was great for a beginner. The pieces are relatively large. When you get into the carrot top, this is the top of that carrot. So that's where the pieces start getting really, really tiny. Still manageable and still great for scraps. But start with the bunny, build your confidence, then work on the carrot portion of that design if you choose to do the carrot as well. Okay. Judy wants to go over the placement of the first piece. So just to reiterate, you will start with the paper portion of the pattern. Then you will put your first fabric wrong side facing the back side of the paper. So both right sides are facing out if you're flipping it over. Does that make sense? Then your second fabric will be right side facing the first fabric. So you have paper and then you have two right sides facing underneath of your paper. So your very first seam, you are joining piece 1 with piece 2. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. Jenny just ordered cotton and steel set. Can't wait to try it. It's a really great thread for piecing. You can also use it to quilt your finished block as well. Quilting with a lighter weight thread is going to make your thread kind of disappear into the fabric. So you can choose a neutral color that comes with that beginner quilting kit, or you can choose a color that coordinates with your design. So for this, you know, like a teal color for your quilting. And you'll see the quilting a little bit, but mostly the design is going to be your focal point or your pieced blocks. So if you want a more pronounced looking quilting, use a 30 weight cotton from Sulky. That is a really great thread for quilting. It is, when I take quilts into my long armor, she prefers the Sulky 30 weight cotton with her long arm machine. Plus, we like to use blendables a lot. The blendables thread is really unique to Sulky. I'm looking around for a spool of it right now. I never have something on hand when I really want it. Sorry about that, but goodness, today, I tell ya, might as well be April Fools. So Sulky Blendables thread has random color patterns across the length of the thread. So the color will change every about 2.5 to 5 inches. So you don't get the same color pattern if you're using it for straight line quilting, outline quilting, that type of thing. A lot of the times if you use a traditional variegated thread, your color pattern will be exactly the same across your quilt. Well, with Sulky Blendables, it's completely randomized and totally different. So that is a really cool effect. I love to use that thread for quilting as well. All right. If you do have questions, be sure to get them in the comments here, because anybody who is putting a comment or question, liking and sharing today's post is eligible for our freebie. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. Our giftie today is a 6-pack of Sulky rayon and filaine thread, and I will be talking about that shortly. All right, glue stick is helpful. Thank you, Joni. A lot of people, like I said, have their own methods for foundation paper piecing, but I gotta tell you, this Sulky paper solvy is a game changer. All right, Sandra says, is it easier to trim before sewing the next piece? Then you are lining the new piece with the correct seam. So that's what I do. I will sew that seam, then fold my paper back and trim that seam allowance. Then keep building on the block. If you don't trim that seam allowance after you sew it, then you're going to have your wonky little scrap edges inside of your sort of next piece. Hopefully that makes sense. But if you want to trim before you sew that edge and you're lining up your fabric pieces precisely to account for your seam allowance, you may certainly do that method. I just find that sometimes I'm either a little bit off, or I've trimmed a piece and I actually meant it to go in the opposite direction when I fold it to the right side. So now if I rip that out, I kind of have a wasted scrap piece. So I just like to give myself a lot of room for error, if you will. And I think that's a great tip for, beginners that are just want to try foundation paper piecing for the first time. Anne says, so the first piece of fabric goes wrong side against the paper. Yes, that is correct. So that your fabrics are sewn right sides together. That upper fabric wrong side is facing the paper. So you can see I left my paper in the middle portion of my bunny block so that I could show you all how I'm going to remove it. So we have paper, wrong side, pretty right side of our block. And I kind of have to like I said, it's a meditative activity. I kind of have to remind myself, okay, right side, wrong side, wrong side, as I'm building the block. Okay. And again, Joni says, once you get going, it's not too bad. It plays with your mind a little bit. It really does. And you feel really accomplished when you're done as well. So, okay. Once you have all three portions of your bunny, you are then going to piece them together. So like I said, you will cut along the outer edge. Cut your fabric along the outer edge, because this edge is going to be your seam line when you're piecing those three portions together to create the bunny. So as you can see, if I show you my wrong side, I have pieced these along those outer edges. Then your side seam allowances are going to be what you use to join the carrot side with your bunny side. And you can choose either side that you want to sew your carrot to, or like I'm doing, I am just isolating the bunny, which is why I am now removing my paper. So again, my camera just turned off, so I'm going to have issues with that, but I'm going to hold this up and you'll be able to see it. And also, my cotton swab is no longer wet, ladies and gentlemen. Oy, oy, oy. I'll give you the general idea. So, you will saturate your cotton swab. I live in Colorado. It's very dry. You'll saturate your cotton swab and then run it along your seam line, fully saturating that paper. And you will watch as your paper begins to dissolve. So once it is dissolved along your seam line, you can simply lift it away. And actually my Q-tip was wet enough so that I could lift that away. So lift up all your paper along those seam lines. And it comes off just like that. Now, like I said, you can also saturate it a little bit more. You can leave the paper in until it's quilted and bound, and then throw the whole thing in the wash. So your fabric, for obvious reasons, needs to be washable or wetable. You need to be able to get it wet without spotting and things like that. So I wash my fabrics prior to doing foundation paper piecing if I know I'm going to launder the finished item, at least once, if not several times. So keep that in mind. It becomes tricky when you're working with scraps. So if you are an avid foundation paper piecer, you may want to pre-wash your fabric as soon as it comes to you prior to using it in other projects. That way you know your scraps have been pre-washed. Now, if it does not matter to you and you're going to be using this as a seasonal decoration that maybe you only bring out once a year and then you store it away nicely and it's not going to get dirty and soiled, you don't have to pre-wash your pieces. Just use your fabrics as is. Or you can wash it after the fact it may shrink up a little bit on you. And if you have lovely quilting, making sure that nothing shifts and puckers, then you may get a little bit of fluff as your fabric shrinks a little bit around your quilting stitches. So there are all kinds of different looks based on how you prep things, how you sew things, and honestly, it all comes down to personal preference. But I just want to give you those things to think about and consider when you're building your own blocks. Okay. Bonnie says you need a gopher to help during your live. I know, I need several assistants. But we get along okay. We get it done. All right. So if you do have scraps, someone's asking for suggestions about washing a bunch of scraps. This becomes difficult, right? Because your fabric can fray and things like that. You can get a mess in your sewing machine. You can put a bunch of scraps, let's say, in one of those laundry bags that you would use for lingerie, perhaps, and put them in there and wash them that way. Another more tedious thing to do is take your larger scrap pieces and serge or zigzag finish the edges of those pieces before putting them in the washing machine. You might still get some edges that fray a little bit, but all in all, your scrap will remain intact. So if you have some larger scraps or larger, cut off yardage pieces that are still in pretty, that are still in a little bit larger state, that would be what I would do. Little scraps like this that you're like, oh, this might fit the bill for a foundation paper piece section someday in my life. Maybe just don't worry about washing it. I don't know. I know I could get crucified for saying these things. But I think a mesh laundry bag that's used for lingerie would work to contain some of those. If they get really, really small, either just, let's part with them. Let's say, thank you for fulfilling your fabric destiny for me, and let them go. Again, I could be crucified for this language, but I've said it out loud, so there it is. All right, I want to get to showing you a couple of other things you can do with this block. So here is a finished bunny that Sugary Do shows on their website. Again, this block is from Sugary Do. I linked to where you can purchase this digital pattern for yourself. It's very affordable. It's a great, quick and easy project you can do with your paper solvy that is on sale. What I thought was really cute is they gave this little bunny some eyes. And in the blog post, I describe how you can do this using Sulky 12-weight cotton petites thread. This is the thread that we recommend for handwork and hand embroidery. It's also great for a quilting thread. 12-weight means it's even thicker weight than that 30-weight cotton I was talking about. This also comes in a blendable variety. You can use some 12-weight cotton petites to create some little facial features of your bunny. So you can add some whiskers. You can add these little cute little eyes. You can add some French knots if you have a polka dot fabric like this, just to kind of emphasize that. So there are lots of ways to personalize your bunnies. You could do a different face for each bunny that you are stitching out. So maybe one is winking, one has the closed eyes, one has funny whiskers, one has little, bunny teeth. So you can really have fun with it and make it your own. I thought that was such a cute idea that they added. And then here is a little lap quilt that they created using 2 of those bunny blocks. So now you can see that carrot and what it looks like. And then a dog and bone and a cat and fish. So cute. So like I said, if you're not celebrating Easter or you want your sort of Easter decor to take you all through spring, you could grab up some of their other blocks or even this quilt design and create something that will take you from Easter in through the rest of your spring decor, and you can have this out for a few months. So I thought this was a really great kids gift, or kid quilt, or even like a play mat for a newborn. But also just really cute Eastery decor. You could hang this on your wall, or put it over the back of your couch or favorite chair. So super cute. And you can see some of the different fabric combinations that they used at Sugary Do, and I just fell in love with this. So lots of ideas that you can draw from as inspiration for how to use your funny bunny block from Sugary Do, and get more, paper piecing practice under your belt. So next, I want to go into another great spring project. I know I'm going a little long today, so bear with me here. But we introduced these new thread palettes at Sulky, and the machine embroidery palette is our giveaway today. So one lucky viewer who is commenting, liking, sharing today's post, or otherwise engaging with us here on Facebook, you will be eligible for the gifty today. So this is the handwork version of this palette. It comes with 6 of those Sulky Cotton Petites threads that I was just talking about that are great for handwork. And with purchase of this 6-pack, you also get 2 really great handwork designs. One is this beautiful dandelion design that you can do hand embroidery style. And it also comes with a cross-stitch dandelion pattern. So you will get both patterns delivered digitally with purchase of that 6-pack, and those 6 threads are the ones that you need to create either one of these projects. So really cute. And we kind of developed this relationship, if you will, with the dandelion motif as we were putting together our virtual booth for QuiltCon this year, because we discovered that the dandelion is a really great symbol for 2021. The dandelion symbolizes joy and hope for the future and rebirth and all of those good things that give us the great feelings that we need embarking on a new year, hopefully with promises of a better future as we navigate past this pandemic. So we really thought that the dandelion was a great symbol for hope. So we created these thread kits and these special project downloads and designs so that you could add dandelions to the projects that you create and get that same warm and fuzzy feeling as we, move forward, like I said. So that is the handwork palette. We also have, here is the hand embroidery design at work. So you can see those pretty stitches. The whole center of that dandelion is done in a cluster of French knots. And then you have, your dandelion is being blown across your fabric. This actually was done on a tea towel, so it looks really pretty for spring decor. If you hang this, in your kitchen somewhere, it's just a beautiful addition and decorative accent. So if machine embroidery is more your thing, this is today's giveaway. And it includes 5 spools of Sulky rayon thread and 1 spool of Sulky filaine thread. Filaine is that acrylic thread, and it'll come on a smaller snap spool here in the 6-pack that we're offering. I'm just showing it on the larger spool, which we also carry as well. But it's a very textured, fuzzy sort of thread, and you can brush it out using our filaine wire brush so that your dandelion blooms, and it has this great 3D effect of dandelion fluff. So I will show you that right here. So it's a little bit harder to see in this image, but I happen to have the project I created using this dandelion design. So with purchase of that 6-pack, you get this dandelion machine embroidery design, and you can stitch it out in your regular embroidery machine. And then once you are finished, you'll take your wire brush and go across all of that white Folane acrylic thread and bloom it so that you have this texture and dimension, and you have really given life to your dandelion. So really cool product, great threads, wonderful designs to bring a little bit of joy into the projects you create. And we wanted to extend to you an opportunity to look at the page we built for our virtual booth at QuiltCon. So I linked to that page for you so that you could get all of those resources. You'll find a hand embroidery stitch guide. You'll find a free printable that has a dandelion design on it, and then tons of other projects you could create to showcase those dandelions that are featured with these thread palettes. So head on over there. You can check out the page. There's a little video of me talking about our beloved dandelion as well. So you can check that out, and we encourage you to do so. So let me just make sure I have addressed most of the questions today. If you haven't gotten your question answered, because quite honestly, they go by really fast on my screen. If you haven't gotten an answer to your question, please reach out to us at info@sulky.com. We will also try to answer all the questions in today's comments as well. So keep that in mind. We're always here for you to answer your questions. Denny wants to know, how does it run through the machine if it gets fluffy? So it's a thick 12 weight thread, just like our cotton petites, but it does have that texture to it. So it is quite fuzzy. I don't know if you can see from my camera, but you need a large needle when you're using this for machine embroidery, and you need to slow your machine way, way down. You also need to be sure you're using a lighter weight thread in the bobbin. So Sulky bobbin thread, which is a 60 weight thread, works great. Along with your large needle, you need at least a 116 needle to accommodate this thread. You also want to set your machine to not automatically cut your jump stitches. And on most machines, you have that setting, that option to turn that off. If you don't turn that off, what's going to happen is your machine will bring the thread toward the wrong side of your work and create like a little knot, basically tying off your thread at the beginning and end of your stitch. With a thread that is thick like this, that extra knot is just going to be more density for your needle to have to go through, and your needle's going to struggle, and you could even have a broken needle because of all of that density. You also need to make sure that the design you're using with Folane thread is digitized for heavier weight threads. You'll find designs out there that are labeled brushed or thick or even heavy. You need to even double check the description of those designs to see if Sulky Folane thread will work for those designs. So you can reach out to the digitizer, reach out to the company that is selling that design, and just double check. Can I use Sulky Folane thread? It's a 12 weight thread. Can I use that for this design? So take that into account. If you try to use this thread with a design that's built into your machine, let's say, that is digitized for a 40 weight rayon, which is traditionally used for machine embroidery, this thread will not work. It will basically stitch over itself in different fill areas. You'll have too much density. You'll get a bird's nest underneath your fabric. Your machine or your needle could break, and you will wonder what's going on with this thread. It's because the design is not digitized to support the weight of this thread. So it is a little bit of a tricky animal, but once you master how to set up your machine for success and the right design to use, that's why the 6-pack is really great, because you get the dandelion design and you get the 5 rayons and the 1 Folane thread that you need to stitch out those pretty dandelions, all in one great little package. So you can rest assured that that design is going to work with the threads that we've included in that palette. Be sure to grab up some 116 needles as well. I also like to use the titanium 116s. Personal preference, they're extra strong, so they can penetrate through lots of layers of fabric and stabilizer, and thread as you move along the design. All right, Elaine says she just finished using filaine thread in a hand-stitched floral pattern and the result is beautiful. Yes, it looks really cool in handwork. That extra fluff that you get from the thread just adds another dimension to your design. All right, lots of people loving the fluff, so good, good. Karen wants to know, could you couch this thread? I don't see why not. I think you could definitely use it as your lay down thread to couch over. You just need to make sure that the stitch that you're using for couching, whether it's a zigzag stitch or other decorative stitch, is narrow enough so that your filaine thread doesn't slip out of those couching stitches. Liza wants to know, where is your link to the dandelion design and materials? So in the description of the post today, you might have to hit the little see more button to see the entire description. I linked to the dandelion palette for hand embroidery and the dandelion palette for machine embroidery. The designs for those respective either handwork or machine embroidery come with the thread palette. And also you will see a link for the dandelion shop. That is the landing page that we built for our booth at QuiltCon, and I'm sharing it with all of you so you can take a look, grab a couple of freebies that we have there, and a lot more inspiration and links to other projects that support these dandelion designs. Okay. Again, if you have other questions we are not addressing today, please let us know at info@sulky.com. Sandra says she sewed the chili cat on a Christmas stocking and the filaine thread worked beautifully. That is awesome. And it really goes along with my little camera snafu I was having today because I took some video stitching out that chili cat, and that is what you were seeing in my strange camera view when I was trying to get my camera to work and show you my overhead shot. So we're tying it all together here today on So What. All right, so thank you all for joining me today. Again, if you want to be considered for our giveaway, which is the Dandelion Machine Embroidery Palette, please like, share, comment, engage with our post today, and you will be eligible for that. I'll be picking the winner tomorrow afternoon, so give some people some time to chime in. And I always appreciate you joining me on So What on my Tuesday afternoons and coming along, even when I change the time on you a little bit. So I appreciate that. And join me next week because we've got another exciting So What in the works. And I will be sure to post my cute little bunny bunting when I get it completed. So you all do the same and share your bunny bunting with us. Tag it with So Better with Sulky, and that way we can see your creations. So I appreciate you spending your afternoon with me, and I look forward to next time.